Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for the Cavio webinar. We're very happy that you can join us. My name is Laura Riskus. I will be your host for the session today. Today's webinar topic is the learning affect. Yes, we mean affect with an A. Our presenter today is Jeff Carpenter, our founder and CEO of Cavio Learning. So before we start, I have a few housekeeping items, want to make sure that all of you can participate. All attendees are in listen-only mode, so we do want you to participate in the conversation. So if you would, go ahead and type your questions or your comments into the chat panel on the right side of your screen, and either I myself or Jeff will be answering those questions. And we'll be stopping throughout the presentation as well to answer those questions. So if you don't get a written response, we more likely will also be providing a verbal response as well. Today's live webinar will be recorded, so we'll be sending everyone the link to the recording within the next 24 hours. So let's go ahead and let's start our webinar.
Great, thank you, Laura, appreciate it.
You bet, thanks, Jeff.
All righty, so today we're gonna be talking about the learning effect. It is, really today as we start to look at kind of the effect that learning can have on the organization. So today we're going to talk about one of the most valuable assets in your organization and how your strategic business plans must include a new pillar of business for you to be able to continue to be competitive, reduce your costs, and really retain the intellectual capital within your organization. If you achieve these things, you need to think about the human capital or the people inside of your organization, and you need to think about them differently than you have in the past. They must be thought about and planned for as a global economy recovers from the Great Recession, and employers are fighting over the scarcity of skilled resources. So how do you turn what was once an afterthought and kind of a necessary evil inside of an organization and of doing business into a strategic pillar of your business? So that's really what we're here to talk about today. So just a little background about me. So yes, I am the founder and CEO of Cavio. We have been in business now for coming up on 15 years. So doing really everything from strategic resourcing, strategic planning, and instructional design services with our clients. So what is our passion? So our passion is really be able to drive business value through learning. And we do this really through a whole myriad of different service offerings that we have for our clients. We do that through really performance interventions, our strategic approach to how we look at issues and problems inside of an organization. And really our passion is really to change the landscape of the learning space, to be able to have learning as that valued resource and that valued partner inside the organization. So I'll get over into, so for all the learning nerds we're all learning nerds, for the grammar nerds in the audience. So affect was purposely chosen to draw attention to how learning can drive emotion, desire, and especially as influencing behavior or action in your employees. This is really critical. It's critical to think about this as we look at your current and the future workplace and the employees that are really coming into the workplace, not just the ones that are leaving, not just the boomers, the Gen X, and you start looking at the millennials and then the Gen Zs that are coming in. So it's important that you start to look at all of those different pieces. So let's start really at the beginning. So let's start at your strategic planning. So every year, each of us look into our crystal ball to work on our strategic plan for the following year. So we focus on marketing, sales, new product development, your SWOT analysis, measurement dashboards, key initiatives, and that can go on and on and on. But how many of you spend the time on the strategic value of not just hiring, but the strategic retention of people within your business? This is really a critical aspect of it. I think people really overlook what it means to really hold on to those valued employees, and it goes beyond just giving them different benefits and really just kind of overall, how do you continue to retain them and keep that critical talent? Your business is really made or lost just not on the product or service that you have, but you can count the number of great ideas and inventions that have been relegated to the scrap heap of business failures. What separates average from exceptional organizations is the culture, the engagement, and the retention of knowledge that adds fuel to the system. So why would you include learning as an equal pillar to your strategic process? I think it's important as we start to look at this is we really need to kind of go back and look at what are some of the key drivers that are going on now inside the economy. So right now, the Great Recession has caused many employees to stagnate in their skill sets. As businesses pulled back on employee development, the labor market was tight and employees' personal development started to fall off due to the overall expense. So people stopped really reinvesting in themselves and being able to learn those new and different skills. And employers overall really started to kind of pull back and say, we're just going to hunker down and work with what we currently have. As we exited the recession, and we're still in that process, the search for qualified talent has begun in haste. So that those employees that are really truly skilled in what we need are really difficult to find right now because of that stagnation. So part of that also is there's been a buildup or pent-up demand for movement inside the employee base. So employees had really hunkered down and were looking and are now beginning to look for new opportunities in greener fields. Boomers are continuing to exit the workforce. Immigration policies are causing some issues, so getting in some additional qualified talent from overseas. And people are now coming back into the marketplace. Those people that were sitting on the sideline during the recession are now starting to kind of tip back into the marketplace. But all of this has created a skill chasm that's leaving employers in the desperate fight for and to retain their key talent. So if you look at what we have up here, there's a study done by McKinsey. It was actually was done this year. Really was talking to employers really about what it is that how are they going to upskill? So how are they going to resolve that potential mismatch between the skills that they want and need and the skills that the marketplace currently has? So you start to look at in the United States is really, they're saying that it's going to be an equal mixture of hiring and retaining, just retraining overall, or only by retraining. So if you look at those areas, I mean, you're talking about a very large opportunity for the learning and development space to really make an impact on the business. In Europe, you see that's even more critical as we start to look over towards Europe. I think really inside the United States, when they say mainly by hiring that 30%, I think that's a little Pollyanna in the approach there. I think it's going to be greater, that middle piece about the equal mixture of hiring and retraining, I think is going to be critical. So as you start to look at onboarding programs, as you're looking at upskilling programs, this is going to become even more critical over the next few years. So the workforce conundrum. So as we start to look at, we are at an 18-year low of unemployment rates. So the unemployment rate for June was at 4%. We have record employment for Black, Hispanic, and women. So we have not seen this level of employment in a long time. There's 2.1 million people re-entering the workforce. Those are the people that have been sitting on the sidelines all through the recession. And 1.5 million were the long-term unemployed are now coming back into the workforce. So there's a very large gap there as you start to get into the further regions of the people in the workforce. We're going to have to spend a lot of time really doing a lot of retraining and looking at what that means. So how can you upskill? So employers have to choose from really 5 different options as the skilled workforce continues to contract and people with marginal skills come back into the workforce. So you can do things from retraining, the reconfiguration of roles, hiring, outsourcing, and workforce automation. So let's talk about each one of those. So retraining really involves raising the skill capacity of the current employees by teaching them new or different skills and hiring entry-level employees with the goal of training them in the new skills needed. So really kind of changing your approach and how you look at your current workforce. Who has the potential to get to the next place where they need to get to? These actions ensure that your in-house functional knowledge, experience, and understanding of the company culture are preserved as employees acquire the skills that are needed for the workforce. So this is really a great way to be able to retain some of that potential talent that you currently have inside the organization, reinvest in them, and be able to push them up further inside the organization. Another thing you can do is really look at the reconfiguration of roles. So companies can redeploy workers with specific skills to make better use of skill capacity already available to them. So you can do this really by unbundling tasks. So when you start to look at your overall workflow and the tasks inside that workflow, you can start to unpack those and break those apart. So that way you don't have to have one person with all of that knowledge. You can then start to spread it out across all of those different groups. So once you unpack it, then you can really look at repackaging it based on your overall mix of your employee base, and shift parts of the workforce towards other tasks that are of higher importance or other entities, or really by redesigning the entire workflow process. So really taking some time to look at how do you reconfigure the roles, reconfigure the responsibilities, reconfigure the workflow to work with your current employee set. So hiring, really this is where I think there's going to be a lot of the fights are going to take place. And with that pent-up demand of people that were hunkered down are now starting to look around, acquiring those individuals or entire teams of people with the required skill sets is really another option. Although you have to remember that the supply of talent in the market right now may be insufficient for all companies to pursue this strategy. So it's difficult. It will be difficult for everyone to pursue the strategy of just identifying talent and pulling them in, because people will start to move around quite a bit. It'll be more and more difficult to really find in and hone in on that key talent. Another option is outsourcing. So companies can really deploy skills brought in from outside organizations. So you can use contractors, freelancers, temporary workers from staffing agencies. And contracting really allows companies to acquire rapidly the skills that they need, so you can be able to scale up very quickly, but then also be able to scale down without really causing any impact to the organization. So last one in here is workforce automation. So releasing employees might become necessary in some companies. So be able to look at the skill sets and be able to release some of the folks out. Partially those in industries that are not growing very rapidly. You want to look at ways that you can use automation to substitute labor in a significant way. So really looking at how you can either use technology, use mechanical automation. So how can you start to look at some of those really basic skills and be able to automate those moving forward? Now it's important, and I brought this up in the past, is as you start to look at all of those different things, you're starting to see that really only 8% of the CEOs worldwide have really any understanding of the true value learning and development provides to their business. Clearly, L&D can impact the ability to capture the hearts and minds of the next generation of talent. And if there isn't a plan in place, if there isn't a strategic lever that you're going to be able to pull in how to retain and attract talent, it's going to be, most businesses will really struggle, and a lot of them will start to falter and or fail. So the other thing that just came out recently is that talent is now the #1 concern of CEOs in the most recent surveys. So there's this continued talk about talent, and everybody's looking at HR, but what they should really be looking at is not only HR, but also looking at the L&D function. So to be able to really, to talk about this, I think more in depth. So we needed to really talk about two of my favorite topics. So one of them is learning, and how can we use this as a strategic advantage to attract and retain talent. How it helps your organization achieve your strategic vision and organizational goals, and really being able to look at how you can quantify the value of the investment that the business puts into L&D. Now the other is millennials. So yes, I know everybody's been talking about millennials for a long time, and it's important that you start to look at how things are starting to change in the workforce, and how the millennials are really impacting what's going on. Now we need to recognize that first of all, most of the millennials at the front edge are in their 30s, so they've been in the workforce for a long time. But as you start to look at the back edge of the millennials coming in, and really the Gen Z that are following behind them, it's really important that you look at what it is that they're looking for in the marketplace. What are they looking for from an employer, and how you can use that to be able to leverage those opportunities from an L&D perspective. How can L&D be able to help retain and attract that talent is going to be absolutely critical, not just for the millennials, but you look at the Gen Z following behind. And you know, the millennials have always been the most studied generation that's out there, and I'm sure that, you know, the millennials are sick of all the jokes and everything that goes along with it. But there's been a lot that's been said about what the millennials want. There's been a lot that's been studied about it. But what we're going to do is we're really going to talk about how the workforce is shaping up, and really what are some of the big pieces you want to look at. So the profile in 2017, this is what it looks like. So the data represents workers really 16 years of age or older. So as the millennials really continue to flood the job market, they're often seen as job jumpers, listless, and disengaged in by their companies. They're the largest generation within the workforce, and we as employers are failing really to inspire and harness the skills and capabilities of this confident, ambitious, and tech-savvy group. This is on us. This is something that as business people, we have not been able to harness in on. The idea of being with a company for 5 to 10 years isn't long gone. So people talk about the millennials are jumping all over the place. It's not. You still can have people that will stay with an organization for 5, 10, 20 years, but it's really because the business has not adapted to the new needs of the workforce. Those times of being brought into the business and being taught how the business has been run since the dawn of time. So the Gen X folks, me being one of them, as you came out, the boomers took you underneath their wing and really taught you how business was run before, and you had to prove yourself before you were taken in, and some of your ideas were really taken seriously. But proving yourself in the context of historical business practices before you're considered worthy to be able to be at the table are really kind of long gone. So there's a new look at the way that they approach technology, the way that they are approaching how things are going. So millennials are changing the paradigm and the expectations of the workforce, and they have the numbers to insist on that change. It's important to remember that this isn't just a millennial problem. So this is an evolving business issue that needs to be addressed. So as you start to look at, Gen Z is just starting to kind of tip into the workforce. And these issues, if they're not addressed now, are only going to accelerate over time. So this loss is costing organizations millions of dollars every year in recruiting, productivity, and knowledge drain. So as the boomers start to retire, the Gen Xers are starting to kind of take over some of those roles, but the millennials have really the numbers in place and can insist on those changes. That's where the talent pool lies, between the Gen Xers and the millennials, as the boomers start to retire. And it's important that you continue to really keep a close eye on what's needed. We'll get to talk about those here in just a second. So the employee revolving door. So 71% of companies say losing millennial employees increases the workload and stress level of their current employees. So as millennials leave for whatever reason that they're leaving, the rest of the workforce has to really be able to pick it up. And a lot of the talent requisitions have not been fulfilled. Millennial turnover causes losses in time and productivity. So 56% say it takes between 3 and 7 weeks to hire and train a fully productive millennial. And most of the time, millennials leave after 3 years. So that's just at the point in time where they're becoming fully productive, they're fully ingrained, they understand the business, and they're able to start to move forward. And it's costing companies between $15,000 and $25,000 to replace each of those millennial employees. And 40% of companies employ 50 or more millennial workers. So as you start to really look at all of the drive that's happening in there, this churn, it's important that we really start to look at each of those things. Now, the RECs used to be, has extended over time. So it's taken much longer to fulfill a requisition for new talent. So it's gone from, I believe it was 14 days, and now it's stretched to over 30 days to really be able to fill a requisition. So you can start to feel the pain of that changeover. So let's talk about what are the things that L&D can do to help, and what are the millennials really looking for? So they're looking for really 5 core things as you look at it. So they're looking for development, So they really want to have training, career advancement, opportunities for growth inside of their current organization. They don't want to stagnate. They don't want to wait 5 or 10 years before they could do something different and new. They want to have meaning in what it is that they do. So they want to have something. There has to be some type of intrinsic meaning as to what makes a difference to them, makes a difference in the community, makes a difference inside the environment. So why is it that, what good things is the business doing? They want autonomy. This group really has the largest kind of entrepreneurial feel within any other generation that's come out. Now that's good and bad. So any entrepreneurs out there will tell you that there is some good and bad there. So we'll get into kind of the good and the bad part of that here in just a minute. So efficiency, so they're always looking at ways to be able to improve the process. So the whole idea of, well, that's just the way we've always done it, does not work. So they're always trying to find better, faster ways to be able to get their work done in an efficient manner. And transparency. So they are not mushrooms, and they are not yes men by any means. They want to be communicated to openly, and they want to be communicated to in an authentic way. Those things are absolutely, those are the 5 key characteristics that they're looking for. So let's get into each one of them. So an appetite for learning and development. So this is really when you start to talk about that they want to have development work. This is considered more important than salary, bonuses, or a 401k program. So they consider learning and development the absolute most critical thing that you can invest in them on. So the question is why? I mean, traditionally people will start to look for salary. They'll look for, how can I get my nest egg pulled together? Well, most of the millennials entered the workforce during the Great Recession, when job prospects were really scarce, and the only way to stand out was to aggressively develop their professional skill sets. So when you look at it, the only ways that they could really differentiate themselves in all of that noise during the Great Recession, when things were really tight to find a job, was to be able to constantly try to develop new skills. So it could be that millennials have put off, mortgages, families, debt, to solely focus on their careers, making them more hungry and ambitious than previous generations. So because a lot of them didn't move out, either stayed at home or stayed in apartments, and there wasn't a lot of buying of mortgages and things like that, this became their critical piece. Is how do I become better? How do I become more developed than my peers? So that I have those opportunities, I can have that advancement that I'm looking for as you start to work through it. So they do recognize that there's no movement forward, that they're becoming obsolete. So you always have to show them a path forward, a way for them to be able to develop additional skills and be able to apply those skills moving forward on an ongoing and regular basis. So it's not a generation that wants to continue to kind of punch the widgets over and over again. They want to understand how are we going to move forward? So they don't want to stagnate, stand in place. So really, how can L&D help? So from a learning and development standpoint, to be able to provide daily development opportunities, so having things like learning minutes, micro-learning, and performance support tools, where they can go out and be able to self-select learning pieces and be able to have those learning components really there when they want them and how they want to consume them. You can personalize the learning. So take the learner first approach to identify what each individual needs and present them with the relevant content. So this is starting to get into a lot of the AI and the adaptive learning that will drive this in the near future. But it's instead of having kind of the cookie cutter approach to learning, being able to say how can we break down the learning aspects to the small enough pieces that it feels personalized to each individual user as they go through it. The other piece is really being able to rethink leadership and management approaches. Leaders need to be more mentors now instead of being a command and control. And it's really mentors to teach them, to guide them, to develop that talent, and to really develop a true learning-based culture. So they're looking for mentors. They're looking for somebody to sit down shoulder to shoulder with them to talk through what it is that they need to accomplish, to teach them how to do those things, so that they can become more proficient and be able to show that moving forward. So business with a social purpose. Millennials are truly passionate about doing work that matters. So think back to what was happening in the world when they started to come of age. So September 11th, wars in the Middle East, the Great Recession, the political scandals that were going on, So any of these would shape your view of the world, and millennials feel a personal responsibility to make the world a better place than what they inherited. So there's this feeling that they owe society, and they want to give back to society to make it really a better place. So studies show that 75% of millennials feel that businesses are too fixated on their own agenda and not focused enough on helping improve society. So this is, you have to have some type of mission or goal into what it is that you're doing. So if you look at some of the different social things that are out there, if you talk about Tom's, the shoes, where they will donate a pair of shoes, or where people will start to give back. Walgreens is another great example of if you go in there to get a flu shot, they'll donate a flu shot to somebody in another country. Being able to have those type of social responsibility pieces as part of your core vision, part of your core mission, is absolutely critical to an organization. So to really be able to look at how you can start to lever those things is, and being able to have those kind of conversations really will attract key talent. So again, how can L&D help in this area? It's, teach the company's mission and values in a way that you inspire new talent. It's absolutely critical that you grab them and hold on to them early. Continually incorporate it into the learning, management, and communications of the business, so they don't lose sight on how their activities relate to the vision and mission. Again, you want to, inside that mission and vision, you have to say, we're doing these things so that we can help in society, or we can do good things. Celebrate your history. So you want to make sure that you're celebrating the company's history, where it started from, where it's going. So you can do this in videos, newsletters, other communications to rekindle the emotion and the connection with the employees. So you have to continually market back to the employees to let them know really all of the good works that are being done. Make sure that you tell stories. So highlight stories of employees and the good works in the business and in the community. We implemented something as simple as really providing, here at Cavio, but providing 8 hours a year of paid time off to give back to the community. So we encourage our employees to be able to go back into the community to do things that they feel is important to them. We do have, a corporate vision of who we want to help from a corporate standpoint, but it's also very important that we give time from an organization so that people can give back to the community in a way that's important and meaningful to them. So really be able to look back. On my talks with the team every month, when we do our all hands meeting, I often talk about and continually stress our obligation as an organization and as individuals to consistently give back, and to really, it is our obligation to give back to the community. Because of what we've accomplished in our life, it's important that we also give those same opportunities to other people inside the community. So focusing on the entrepreneur. So if we start to look at, while we see their demands as kind of this overblown sense of entitlement, technology has put more power in the hands of individuals than ever before. So this should make us rethink about collaboration, being in the office from 9 to 5, and all the other previous business norms. They really feel that there's no barriers for success. It only takes really two things, skill and will. So those are the two issues. So they can overcome any problem that comes to them if they have the right skills. So if you've invested on their development side and they have the skills, or they can identify the skills that they need, and really the overall sense of, I can get this done. I could totally use my skills and figure out a way to get it done. They don't want to play by the old rules of business because they really do think that anything can be done anywhere. It's just a matter of learning or creating a way for it to be done. So when you start to look at those norms, they start to challenge the norms immediately when they come in there. It's not that they have a feeling of entitlement. They're just trying to look at things through a different lens. They're trying to find additional new ways of approaching potentially an ongoing problem, something that's always been an issue, or identifying issues that maybe aren't issues yet. So again, how can L&D help through this process? So provide learning, how and when they want to consume it. So because it's not a kind of a 9 to 5 work day anymore, you have to be able to get to them when and how they want to do it, and make it so that it's on demand and available to them. So as entrepreneurs, we tend to shoot first and aim second. This will allow millennials to be able to access the critical learning at the time of need, So that way it isn't that knee jerk, that they then can say, okay, I understand what should be done, and then they can start to do some thoughtful planning and then execute on the planning instead of executing and then take a step back and plan second. So allowing them to be able to learn those critical skills at the time that they need them not only will make it an impact long term on the individual, but it'll also help the organization, so that way they start to be more thoughtful as they go through the process. So teach a variety of skills is another one. So being able to not just teach them things that are within their lane, but being able to teach them a wide range of skill development needs to be available to address both soft and hard skills to really make them more well-rounded, but also allow them to feel empowered as to what they're doing inside the organization. So it's important that they feel empowered and to be able to do new things, identify things, and fix them. The last one here is really, I can't stress this enough, update, update, update. So things can no longer be out there where they become stagnant and the content grows old. You have to plan to continually identify new content, trends, approaches, technologies, and you have to constantly keep those things updated because they do consume them so quickly that you have to make sure that those things aren't stagnant. So you have to have some type of vitality plan in place to keep all of your content up to date and relevant. So this is really one of my favorites for the millennials. So when you talk about millennials feel that seeing success is often more likely achieved by breaking the rules. This again kind of tips it back a little bit to the entrepreneurial side. So innovators are people who think and act differently. So when you start to think about an entrepreneur, they always kind of think a little bit differently, look through things, the lens a little bit differently, but they tend to entrepreneurs tend to like to break things, just to kind of break it apart and re-put it back together again to see how those pieces could fit differently and work differently. So the millennials have that same kind of feel, that same kind of look. When they look at a workflow, when they look at how things are being done, they want to look at it through a different lens and say, is there a better way to get this done? Why are we doing it this way? Is there a technology way to do this? How can we become more efficient in what it is that we're doing? So they've seen, Netflix, Uber, and other technologies up in entire business industries because those innovators found a way to break the rules and disrupt the industry. This is the reason the millennials are looking for the next disruption, innovation, or hack to become more efficient in their work. So the last piece there, they're trying to come up with a hack. So they always try to figure out a way to get more efficient. And so they go, what, if we only have this piece here, how can we hack into this to make it so that it can be more efficient as we go through it, so that they can then move on to the next thing. So, again, how can, with all of this disruption going on, with all of this feeling of innovation going on a regular basis, and I bring up the innovation part here, just I'll digress for a second, but I've been to a couple of international conferences this year, and the big things are about innovation. So everybody's talking about innovation, 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 but everybody's talking about innovation from a technology standpoint. And instead of looking at how can you innovate in all the other areas, innovation is not just technology. It's getting incrementally better at what it is that you do. That's really innovation. So it's important that as you start to look at it, not just from, innovation is not just an ops thing, not just a, marketing thing or a, technology piece. It's also innovating how we approach what we do is also critical when you start to look at, how you innovate within the organization. So how can L&D help really to unlock the potential of business? So make learning part of the workflow. So make it as they're going through the workflow, they can pull down pieces or pieces get pushed out to them so that they can learn about what it is that they're about to experience in real time. So as they're going through their workflow, they can then access those pieces of information, that pieces of data at the point of time when they need it, when it's most important to be able to show them what it is that needs to be done and then have them be able to actually go and execute it. So this gets back to the whole thing when we were talking earlier about, leadership, but what are they expecting out of leaders? They're expecting coaches, mentors, somebody to be able to be there with them side by side. From a technology standpoint or from a learning standpoint, we need to do the same thing. So how can we help mentor and coach and help them learn as they're going through their day-to-day operation? That's something that needs to be looked at and considered. Also become part of the disruption. So embrace the disruption, embrace where things are going to be a little bit, I always affectionately call it like you're standing on jello. So you need to be able to embrace that disruption and constantly provide access and training to employees on different technologies, as well as how to use them and be able to let them be the expert and have their expertise, come in and have them be that subject matter expert as you're building those things. And really allow them to be able to help guide others to be able how to leverage the new knowledge and the new technology. So the only way, this is something you can't fight. So it's better to say, what's our plan to embrace it? What's our plan to harness it? And what's our plan to be able to project it back out inside the organization so that everybody can start lifting up very quickly. This is only going to speed up over time. So as it's important that you start to think about these strategies now, because as you start to look forward over time, it's going to get more and more important. Okay, open and transparent communications. So quite honestly, it's best if you just come clean and openly communicate with the millennials. They're the most connected generation and really very social online. So they can figure out if they can smell it if you're not being completely genuine and completely open in your communication. So they're programmed to seek out answers and are really ruthless when it comes to demanding honesty, authenticity from their companies, their leaders, and their peers. So it's important as you continue to work inside the workforce, it's no longer the idea of you kind of hide things and just dole it out as necessary. It's really to make sure that you are open and honest and transparent as to what's going on inside the organization, because there's enough out there there's enough out there that they can identify and be able to put those pieces together to see if you're being actually genuine, if you're being honest and truthful with them. So I always tell people it's best to come clean, and it's also just best to be forthright and honest with everybody. So how can L&D help? So conduct brown bag sessions. We've talked about those, and I know brown bag sessions are I just aged myself quite a bit there. But make sure that you have informal get-togethers where employees can hang out and provide short talks about problems that they're solving and ask questions of leaders and others in the business. So being able to have leadership in place with all the other employees, and not just from just their group, but from other parts of the organization, so that people can talk openly about what are some of the issues that they're experiencing and what it is that they're trying to solve, so they can start to build that network, but also so they can start to really learn about some of the other ways that people are doing things, so they can pull in some of those aspects. So really kind of creating that social culture there. Make real-time announcements and updates. So as soon as you know something's going on, as soon as you want to do it, don't hold off until Monday morning or whatever, just to get it out there. So educate your employees about the ongoing business developments to directly improve their engagement and performance. When people fully understand what's going on, the power of the organization to really rally up underneath the organization to be able to help make those changes, when you have more open communication, it allows everybody to understand where things are at and how things are moving forward. So with that, Laura, I will pass it back to you for any types of questions that we have for the webinar today.
Sure, absolutely. Thanks, Jeff. I really appreciate it. One question I have is, what are your thoughts on how L&D can engage to help retention during a transition reorg? What questions should L&D ask HR during a very hectic time?
So as you're going through a reorg, I think it's important that before you start the reorg process, you identify who the key talent is that you want to make sure that you keep. And that you start to look at what's the communication plan that you want to have, both for those employees that are being displaced, as well as the employees that are currently inside the organization. So as you start to put your plan together, you need to really openly communicate consistently with the employees that are there. Also, give time to deal with the feelings that are happening as you're going through there, but also paint the clear vision of where you're heading and why it's being done. It's as a leader, it's as important not just to just tell what's going on and why it's happening, but also where are you going? Because everybody has to be able to stand up and follow where it is that you're taking the company. And they want to go on the journey with you. For those employees that are displaced, it's make sure that they're treated with dignity and respect as they're leaving the organization, because it's important. No matter it may not be their fault that they're leaving or that they need to leave because of a change in the organization as a whole, but it's important that they have a good feeling about the organization after they leave.
Super. Awesome. Thank you very much. I have another question. A major challenge these days are almost any learning is directed towards an online delivery format. What is your suggestion for us as L&D professionals to demonstrate the need for face-to-face learning?
So I think over the years you've been hearing, and it's like a prediction almost every year, that the classroom is dead, and it's actually furthest from the truth. Even now, when you took everybody who's in the in business right now, it's still the most popular amongst employees way for learning. I think the classroom itself has to change how it's leveraged. So you can still do a lot of the e-learning pieces. You can still do a lot of the virtual instructor-led. You can do all these different things that are there, but those should be to be able to set up to solve some type of problem inside the classroom. So the classroom itself needs to be more of a laboratory, a way to work on cases, work on scenarios, be able to hone your skills in a safe environment. But all the learning should take place up to that point, and that can be done, on job, online, peer-to-peer. But when you come into the classroom, that's your laboratory. So you need to think about the classroom as the laboratory, where they can prove things. We can have experts in the room with them working through those problems. To me, that's the business case for doing things inside the classroom. It's your laboratory.
Okay, super, thank you. I have a question going back to one of your slides about the workforce conundrum. That particular statistic, is that a global statement?
Let me get to it.
I want to give you a chance to go back to that slide.
No, this is U.S. based, so that is
okay.
That is U.S. based. So what we're seeing is that Europe is lagging a little bit. Not necessarily just from the unemployment standpoint, but really when you start to look at how things are shifting and changing, you're seeing it change faster in the U.S. and then it kind of jumps the pond and goes over into Europe. So we've been seeing kind of this wave going across. Now, I don't think that'll always be the case, but over the last couple of years, you've seen changes here in the U.S. and then Europe will start to feel that. When you look at the breakdown of the millennials, they actually don't have as many millennials entering the workforce or in the workforce currently, but they are kind of coming up. So a lot of the issues that we're facing now, the European part of the world will be facing that here in the next 2 to 3 years. So basically, they're going to start feeling it now.
All right. Okay. I have another question here. How are L&D metrics affected by this entrepreneurial mentality or this approach?
Metrics and measurement. So the thing is, I think that it makes the metrics and measurement more important that you have those in place, because then you can really start to look at and get people to focus not just on the I think, I feel. It's really saying, let's look at what are the metrics telling us, what's the data telling us, so that way we can hone in on the very specific areas of the organization that really need help. So you're not throwing out that blanket of I jokingly say that learning is the cause of and solution to all of corporate's issues, but it's then you can get very targeted in your learning approach, because if you know exactly what the data is telling you, saying if we can raise this, raise or lower this metric, whichever direction is most positive, when it falls out of the norm, is it will allow you to be able to change your approach in how you attack a specific learning intervention. And it may also let you know whether or not it should be a learning intervention, but it makes it more targeted so that you get rid of kind of all the fluffy pieces that are typically kind of wrapped around it, and you get right to the point. And so it's less time that they have away from the job and more time that they have to be able to really help fix the problem that you've just identified.
All right. Super. I have one more question here, and I think it was kind of touched on a little bit, but Millennials are the YouTube generation, as you kind of actually, Jeff pointed out, a little bit of the serve yourself group. How do you see learning working with the business when the business thinks that learning is either the traditional WBT, ILT, check the box? And how do you work with the business in order for them to understand the impact of kind of changing that approach?
So I think L&D needs to not focus on the widgets. Is the biggest issue, I think. So we come in talking about, ILT, VILT, videos, you name it. We start kind of throwing out the pieces that are going to be needed. I think from an L&D standpoint, we need to start talking about what the overall solution looks like. And then we can talk tactically then later on, if they're interested, what are the pieces to help achieve that overall goal from the solution. So I think talking from a solution standpoint, so think about it, so I'll flip it over. So think about it from the standpoint of marketing. So when you go in there, you'll hear people talk about that they need a marketing, a marketing plan that'll help drive new leads, new business, get people to buy more. So you have all of those pieces that are in there. They put together kind of what the overall solution would look like, but they don't spend time talking about, what's the SEO that we're going to put into place? What's the persona of our ideal our ideal client? They don't talk about the tactics. And I think we spend too much time wrapped up in the tactics and not enough time talking about what's the overall solution that you want. And then we'll start to implement the tactics after that. So I think we need to raise our head up a little bit and really start to look at what are the solutions we need to provide to help affect the business and be able to drive the performance that we want to drive. And then the rest of it's just, those are our tactics. Those are the tools in our tool belt.
Fantastic. And actually on that, and this is actually my question in regards to that, when you talk about agile development, I'm sure that there is a role in that as well, where you don't have to create everything and then raise the curtain after everything is perfect.
Correct. So especially when you look at it, if it's throwaway, it doesn't have to be perfect. Things are sometimes, if they're consumed and thrown away, they don't have to be perfect. You don't need to spend a lot of time on them. Especially, as you talk about kind of the rapid development, the agile, you want to be able to get to the point where it is consumable, it makes sense, it achieves the goal, and it's out there. So when you talk about like developing a product, so it's the least viable product. So what is or most viable product? So what is the niche that you can get into where you're not over-engineering it, you're not over-creating it, you're not overspending, but it gets the point across. Now, that doesn't mean you should put together kind of sloppy learning, but it does mean you don't necessarily always need all the polish.
Okay, great.
Cool.
Those are the questions that I have for right now. If anybody has any other questions, you can go ahead. Oh, I do have another question. How about that? In continuation to that question on the metrics, are there a list of metrics for us as L&D professionals to reference?
So there are a lot of different metrics that are out there. So when we work with organizations, we talk about that there are two different sets of metrics. So there's your internal metrics to make sure that you understand that your operation, your L&D part of the business is operating effectively. Those are really only important metrics to you as a leader inside of L&D. And then there's the external metrics that you provide to the business. And those are really from their dashboards and from what's important to them from the business standpoint. So that's when you're speaking business. The one that I always talk about, the kind of the difference is when you look at the internal metrics, everybody laughs at the one where they talk about, butts and chairs. How many people showed up inside the classroom and they're like, yeah, it's not a really good metric. It's actually a very good metric if it's used the right way. So when you use that metric of how many people have attended classroom training, it lets you know whether or not you need to reinvest in those facilities. So that's something that's important to you as a business owner inside of the L&D space, but to the external function, that's not really important to them. So I think internally it's, how do you run your business? Externally, it's how are you helping the business? Those are two different sets of metrics. We have a library of metrics of about 700 different metrics. Now, that's not saying that you use all of them, but you have to pick out the ones that are the most relevant to you as an organization and create those dashboards that provide you true visibility into what's going on inside of your business, as well as what's going on onto your customers or your clients that you support internally. One of the places that you can go look for some of those is the Center for Talent Reporting. That is one I sit on the advisory board for, and I do have to say that that is, they're trying to really be able to put a lot of great things together around standardizing metrics and measurement for the learning and HR space.
Okay, great. Fantastic. All right, I think that is all we have for right now. Jeff, any closing comments?
None right now. So I hope everybody enjoyed it. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to reach out.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Thank you, everyone. And just as a reminder, this webinar has been recorded, and we'll be sending out the recording within the next 24 hours. Thank you, everyone, for your engagement. Jeff, thank you for that great information.
Great. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. Thank you. Bye-bye.